almost nothing in life is ever just anything. It's only the roughness of our mind and almost the dismissive laziness of our minds that we start to corral people into these like pre-made intentions that we assign to them. You're just this, you're just that, you're just this, you're just that. And yet when we talk about ourselves, we're so complex. But everybody else is simple. It makes it simple for us to engage the world that way. We think it helps us to understand the world, but it doesn't. It just forces the world into these boxes that they're comfortable for us, even though they're not real, even though they're actually going to be destructive, because it stops us from being able to encounter the world. If I asked most of us to draw our minds, it'd probably be pretty scary. But if I'm asking you to draw, maybe a brain, we tend to associate the brain with the mind, although they're two dramatically different things. The brain is, again, part of your body. So when we're talking about like thoughts and opinions, those are things that belong directly to the mind, and those are the things that are influenced way differently by the elements. The same things that will ripen corn and rust iron. So now try to start to figure out how it is that you can, with cars and corn, we can predict it. With minds, not so much. Not so much. So you can start to see but the difficulty in talking with people and working with people, because you just don't know how people are going to respond. Because you have all these other things that are also affecting ideas and thoughts and opinions. Things like experiences, things like perspectives. So it's interesting though that we're oftentimes so convinced though that we know what motivates people. They're just greedy. They're just jealous. They're just racist. They're just stupid. They're just nothing is just anything. People are incredibly complex. The things that form our opinions and our thoughts are never just anything. In fact, almost nothing in life is ever just anything. It's only the roughness of our mind and almost the dismissive laziness of our minds that we start to corral people into these like pre-made intentions that we assign to them. You're just this, you're just that, you're just this, you're just that. And yet when we talk about ourselves, we're so complex. But everybody else is simple. It makes it simple for us to engage the world that way. We think it helps us to understand the world, but it doesn't. It just forces the world into these boxes that they're comfortable for us, even though they're not real, even though they're actually going to be destructive, because it stops us from being able to encounter the world. So putting people into these boxes and kind of forcing them into the things that we expect from them, again, it stops us from being able to understand the world. Because, so here's an interesting thing about your brain. Oh, you guys are 10th graders. You guys no one's taken psychology yet. If any of you guys take psychology next year, you'll learn about this phenomenon. And you'll oftentimes hear me say that none of us sees the world the way it is. We see the world the way that we are. We project our expectations out into the world, but it's even deeper than that. Let's say that there's a rose bush outside of your house, a flower bush, whatever. Now, when you walk past it the first time, you looked at it. Oh, look, a rose bush. And when you did that, you committed that rose bush to your mind, to your memory, we're going to say. Now, the next time you walked past that rose bush, if you didn't stop and look at it and study it, when you walked past it, you perceived it, but you didn't perceive it as it actually was. You perceived it based off of your memory. So let's say that there were 10 roses on that bush. When you walked past it the first time, you counted 10 roses. The next time you walk past it, unless you stop and you look at it, as you walk past it, your mind perceives 10 roses. If one fell off, you're still going to see 10 roses, unless you stop and you look at it. So the things that are in your mind that you get used to seeing, you don't update your memory constantly. It's like playing a video game. The only parts of the game that are updated are the parts of the game that you're interacting with. The same is true with your mind, which is interesting because that's one of the things that we talk about with regards to a simulated universe. The way that your mind works seems to work an awful lot like a video game. So when you walk past and you stop and you study it, you can say, oh, look, there's 9 roses now. One must have fallen off. Now, whereas before there were 10. Now the same is true about most things that you interact with in life, and the same is true about people that you interact with. If you go past a person and you expect to see certain behaviors from them, this person's a jerk, this person's mean, this person's this, that's what you're going to perceive. You're going to see that. It takes a lot of interactions to undo that initial perception of them. This is why we say things like first impressions matter so much. That's why, because the first impressions do stay with you and it takes a while to undo them. And by the way, the same is true in the other direction as well. If you have a whole bunch of really positive experiences with a person, then that's what your memory is going to refer back to. That's what you're going to perceive in most of their actions. That's why you'll see people who are in relationships that they'll put up and they'll tolerate a lot of stuff, and we might say, oh, it's because you love them, as though we can even define what that means, as though we can really understand what that means. Here's what it largely means. Now, nothing is everything, but here's what it largely means. It means that you have so many positive perceptions of the person in your memory that it takes a whole bunch of negative ones to undo it, generally speaking, until you update your perspectives. And that's what friends are good for. That's what trusted advisors are good for. They help you to update your perspectives on things. So that's a long way around, just talking about how it is that we form thoughts and opinions. It's not simple. It's not straightforward. Yeah, there's just something about it. As soon as it's not like physical or concrete, we're way less careful about what it is. So for example, what are you listening to right now?
500 Mile Fibers.
What's that?
500 Mile Fibers.
Okay. Oh God. Fuck, that chorus, dude. Gets stuck in your damn head. But you can see, do you realize that you're sitting there tapping your pen, distracting people and bopping around?
Yes.
Yeah, you still don't do that. It distracts people. And then you wonder why teachers don't want you to have these things in your head while we're talking. Now, the influence that you're letting in, do you think he sat there and said, hey, let me be a distracting jerk by tapping my pen and dancing around? Did you set out to do that? Yeah, it just happens because of the things that we allow into our minds. Because the things that we allow into our minds, we just don't understand the depth to which it influences us. If I were to say, hey, here's a bottle of bleach, drink this, you'd be like, hell no, dude, are you kidding me? I'm gonna die if I do that. Okay, fine, just a cap, okay, just a teaspoonful. How about just that? If I were to give you a teaspoon of bleach, you probably, rightfully, you'd understand, no way, this will really mess me up. But then we let other terrible things into our minds all the time. And we convince ourselves, it'll be fine, this won't influence me. Never mind that somehow, for some reason, I seem to dress or talk or behave like the things I listen to, the things I watch. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. No, it's my choice. And we convince ourselves that it's a matter of our will, which it is, but it's a matter of our will based off of influences that come in, that we allow to come in without thinking through the extent to which they're going to impact us. Yeah. Now think about it that we hand over our mind to anyone around here to be upset. The influences, the music that we listen to. Think about the music that you listen to. Like genuinely, if you had a daughter, if you had a son, would you want them to act out the things that your music is talking about? To act out the things that your movies are showing? To act out the things, the TV shows that you're watching? Would you want their real life to be about those kinds of things? And yet for some reason we line up to support it, and we'll say things like, it doesn't really influence me. You have to understand that something influences you. You talk the way you talk because of the family that you were raised in. You'll say, oh yeah, it's your environment, it's your environment. And we'll nod like we understand something deep. It's our environment that shapes us. You realize that your media is a massive part of your environment? Oh, but not that part. Call it what it is. It's because we just really like it. And because we like it, we want to justify using it. I guess the question starts to become, yeah, but why do you like it? Well, I just like the way it sounds. I just like the way it looks. I like the visual aesthetics of it. I like the storyline. Yeah, but why? I didn't ask you what you liked about it. I asked you why you like it. Why is it that those things speak to us and not these other things over here? Why is it that so oftentimes the negative things that appeal to us? And by the way, there are reasons for it. There are reasons for it. And it doesn't mean that you're a terrible person. It doesn't mean you're a stupid person. For some reason, we jump right to that. We assume it's some kind of a criticism when we start to consider things in this way. It's not what it is. It's just an invitation to understand. And there's probably nothing that's more important for you to understand in the whole entirety of the universe than yourself. Because if you don't understand yourself, you're not going to understand how you fit into this universe. And you're going to perpetually be a stranger in a strange land, walking around. And I know some of you probably have to feel like this. You probably walk around and say, I don't feel like I belong here. I don't feel like I belong. And you probably don't. We can talk more about that when you're a 12th grader in the third quarter, when we look at Plato. You probably don't belong here. But it's figuring out, since you are here, you got to figure out a way to understand yourself so that you can fit in somehow, some way, to make the best of it, to make the most of these things. Because we're not tasked with changing the whole universe. Oftentimes we're just tasked with changing ourselves for the better. And if we can't change ourselves for the better, it seems so strange that our streets are constantly full of people who are trying to change the rest of the world. And yet their bedrooms are complete messes. Their lives are complete messes. Their finances are complete messes. Their relationships are complete messes. And yet they're so comfortable and confident telling the rest of the world how it should change. If you can change yourself then for the better, and in a way that doesn't compromise you, and somehow fit into the world, that might be the ultimate aim of all of it. Might be. Because the alternative is just discomfort, unhappiness, eventually resentment, contempt, anger. And that's not going to be good for anybody, but especially for you. So it's just out of self-interest. That's not a bad motivator. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?